Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Halloween is getting ever so close, and I thought what better thing to do than another Halloween-themed build. A fellow co-worker of mine suggested that I make Sam from the horror movie Trick or Treat. I've never seen the actual movie, but after a couple of image searches, I quickly thought it was a pretty cool one to try, and I thought I would use my jack-o'-lantern pattern from last year as the base to put the burlap over to make his head. So today we are making Sam from the horror movie Trick or Treat out of EVA foam and burlap sack and a rope. Let's get to building. So I am pulling this template from an old one that I've used a bunch of times, at least 5 or 6 probably at this point, from everything from Fallout to Fortnite to South Park and now Trick or Treat. This would also make a good base for a Wheatley from the Portal series. Ideas. I will update this one to include the pattern for the oversized buttons that I make later. Download the template in the description below the video, cut the pattern out, and tape together the dotted line pieces to the sphere base. When the foam is rolled up, it can sometimes make it difficult to trace the pattern onto the material accurately, so I hit the ends with a heat gun to flatten it out a little bit before I begin tracing my pattern onto the foam, which is 6mm. This head needs 6 copies of the base shape to make the full build. Make sure to trace the registration marks that go along the edges. These will help you to line up the parts to each other evenly across the seam line later. This is a fairly large sheet, and trying to awkwardly maneuver it around my table to cut it out is a little bit hard, so I'm going to cut it into smaller chunks. Any scrap bigger than the palm of my hand I store in a bin for later. All of these cuts are straight 90-degree angles, so put your blade perpendicular to the cutting surface, lock your wrist, and do your best to keep it straight across the inside of the mark that you have made. Nothing has to be perfect for this build, as it's going to get covered up with burlap anyways, which will help hide all the seam lines and other crimes that you've committed that we won't speak of. I glue up all the edges except for the part at the bottom where your head will go through. I like to use barge contact cement personally, but you can definitely find cheaper, more accessible alternatives at most home improvement and craft stores. I buy mine in bulk online, and barge has kind of been my favorite that I've tried. Spread on the glue and let it set for a couple of minutes. Once the last one is covered, I can go ahead and start on the first one, tacking them together. Work slowly and do your best to keep the outside seams flush. I close large V-shaped darts up, then start joining pieces together. The gentle curve of these parts means you don't need to heat form them with this 6mm foam. If you go for a thicker foam, you may need to heat form it to get it to pull into shape. My head is extremely large, approximately 24 inches around at its widest point. I designed this template to accommodate a hole small enough for a child to fit through. To make the hole adult size, I just traced a line around the circle. Wasn't quite sure how big it needed to be, so I ended up having to cut twice. The tool I'm using is called a border marker, and it's made by Cos Tools. I haven't mastered that finger locking trick that Adam Savage and Jimmy DiResta seem to do effortlessly when they're marking straight lines across stuff, so this tool definitely helps. Once marked, I cut it with a hobby knife and try to shove this massive dome into another dome and hope it fits. Off camera, I put the sphere on my head and with a Sharpie marker approximated the location of my eyes. Now I am just going to cut out some holes to see through. The burlap will cover them up for the most part, so they don't have to be perfect. Two coats of Plasti Dip, then I hit it with brown spray paint. Originally, I bought burlap sacks on Amazon and realized once they got here they were way too thin. Luckily, I have a Hobby Lobby close to where I live and could easily pop in to see what they had to offer. They had a pretty decent selection and I was able to get almost 2 yards for like $8. I have some ideas for the leftovers later. I'm going to use some Gorilla spray adhesive to glue the burlap to the dome. I used it on the Predator mask not too long ago, so I know it will hold up well. I spray both the dome and the fabric, then stick them together, trying to limit the wrinkles to just the neckline, so pulling and pushing in certain areas to get it to flatten out. The midline gets trimmed and I glue the other side separate. Now that both sides are covered, I trim all but about an inch to one side. Then I spray glue on the flap to bend it over on itself. This will be the mid seam that I put the stitching over here in a minute. Initially I thought super glue would glue down the flap, but it didn't. I didn't want to spray adhesive all over the finished surface on the outside, so I figured hot glue would work just as well, and it ended up being what I had to go with. So I hot glued the stitch down and then pushed it till it cooled. Now on to the tedious work of stitching on some twine. I've sewed on details on a couple of my builds into the foam and know it's doable. I guess I forgot how much work it is on your hands. I made it up to about the eyes before I remembered I have a metal awl, and that made it a lot easier. So you basically just pre-poke your holes and push the needle through. They look like an ice pick and are commonly used in leatherworking to punch holes for threads. It works great for foam also. I save my hands a world of hurt as the stitching goes all the way from the front to the back and makes the mouth. Sam has these oversized button eyes that are separated quite a bit further than a normal set of eyes. While yes, you could probably get pre-made ones from somewhere, I figured it would be just as easy to make it out of some 4mm EVA foam. With my circle stencil, I found the approximate size I wanted and traced 4 circles onto the foam. 2 of them will get smaller circles drawn inside of them to act as the brim for the button. I cut them out, glue the layers together, sand the edges even with a sanding and stone bit, then punch out 4 holes in the middle for the threads to be sewed through. They get 2 coats of Plasti Dip when they are done, and then get stitched on the outside border of my eye holes I cut into the foam earlier. Last thing to do is attach the rope that cinches his mask together at the neck. To keep it secure and on the head, I decided to sew it onto the build just below the foam. I started by stitching the back, tied the front together, and then in a couple of spots sewed some over the connection to keep it in place. After that, I did lightly hit some areas with brown and black spray paint to kind of dirty it up a little bit to finish it off. And we are finished. Here is the end result. I think it turned out pretty cool, and it was a relatively simple build, especially since a majority of the build is covered with burlap and I don't have to do a lot of painting, which was kind of nice. It was a bit tedious to go in and hand sew all of this, and you definitely could try and do that before you put this on, but I wasn't sure that I could make it fit tight over the sphere, but overall not too bad. Maybe you will try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to pull some old pattern that you have and used a bunch of different times for a bunch of different things like Fallout and Fortnite and a few other things. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some.
Yay!
And inevitably, they're going to ask you, How'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them much props. So I guess it's time to get ready to go trick-or-treating, huh? Peace out. If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.